If you're preparing to use virtual reality in your language classroom, or if you're just kind of curious about what it could look like and what it might entail, you are in the right place. Good on you for clicking on this video, because the kind of educator that clicks on a video about what to expect when using virtual reality in their classroom for the first time, like, that tells me that you are an educator who does not just accept the status quo. You're an educator who is unafraid to push their comfort zone, try new things, and model for their students what it means to be a lifelong learner. That's really awesome. You're in the right place. I have so much to share with you. But first, if this is our first time meeting, hello. My name is Maria Jernigan. I'm the founder of Redshift Education, and here on YouTube, we're building a community of world language educators who want to make learning relevant for their students today and the tech tools to help them along the way. If that sounds like you, welcome. Make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell as well so you get a notification on your phone every time I upload a new video. If this isn't your first time, welcome back. I'm really excited you clicked again, and I don't take your attention for granted. Thank you so much. So let's get into it. Here's a notebook full. I've got things that you can do to prepare and things you should expect before using VR in the classroom, so stick around. This is gonna be a lot of fun. The first way you should prepare for using VR in your classroom for the first time is to prep your space. Move the desks kind of out of the way and pair the students' chairs in groups of 2. I'm going to talk later in the video more about why groups of 2 students. For now, what you should know is that you want students to have enough space so that they can spin all the way around without their arms or legs hitting someone else. When you're in VR, you don't really have a good sense of where your limbs are, especially in relation to where other things in the room are, because you can't see them. Another way to prep your space is to arrange the desks in stations, and I'm going to talk more about that later. The second way that you can prepare for using VR in your classroom for the first time is power strips. Now, the Oculus Go's battery is fine. It'll even last you like 2 classes back to back, or maybe even 3, but I know that the Oculus Go's battery life for its price is remarkable. If you're using the really low budget versions where they use the student's own cell phone to make this work, you need to be sure that you have power strips on hand in the classroom. There's nothing worse than having students say they can't participate in class because their phone is dead. But here's like a little bonus tip that goes with power strips that you might not think about. And it's super key. If your school lets you reserve hardware for virtual reality in advance, like, it doesn't just belong to you in your classroom. Don't just book your VR hardware for the 1 hour of your class period. Book it for 2 class periods, the class period that you want it in, and book the class period before. Here's why. You don't want a class before you, immediately before yours, to use the VR hardware and run down the batteries. If you have them reserved not just for your class period, but also the class period before the class period you want to use them, if that makes sense, you can guarantee that they have at least that amount of time to be charging so that they are ready with full batteries once you get going. And if you're trying to use the VR hardware in 2 classes back to back, or if your school doesn't let you reserve in the way that I just described, again, power strips. Way number 3 to prepare for using VR in your classroom for the first time, and this is one that I never would have thought of beforehand. Encourage your students to wear less makeup that day, and or to bring like a hairbrush or makeup wherever they want to touch up after the VR activity. Now, I know as a world language teacher, it feels kind of weird and uncomfortable to be telling your students to wear less makeup or to bring touch-up supplies with them. I know, but think about it. They are already thinking about this for other classes, even if it's not, typically Spanish class. In science classes, if there's going to be a lab that day, you've got to wear protective eye gear, and that leaves a mark and can rub makeup off. In PE, you go run a mile, you're going to sweat your makeup off. You're going to mess up your hair. So think about when they put this headset on. You've got foam, they put it on. If they wear a lot of makeup, some might get on this, and that's gross. It might rub off on their face, and of course their hair might get messed up. Your students who, just like all humans, want to look nice, they might really appreciate a heads up. It also keeps the headsets cleaner, and it just makes everybody happier to know what to expect when they go into it, In fact, send them this video. That'll help. I'm doing that with my students. Hey, CHS. And even though they're probably going to forget that you told them in advance, at least, you did. The fourth thing you can expect when using virtual reality for the first time in your classroom is that students will sometimes be tempted to bother each other when one person is in VR and the other isn't. This drives me nuts, and in my classroom and any classrooms that I'm consulting at, I put a hard stop to this from the beginning, and it's never really been a problem. But if you don't know about this going into the experience, you might have some difficulty. So this is important. When you've got a VR headset on your face, as you know, you can't see other people, right? So sometimes teenagers think it's fun to poke a friend that is in VR when they're not. You'll run into this problem, especially if you don't heed my previous advice and you let a student be in VR surrounded by students who are not in VR. Again, groups of 2, you have them both in VR at the same time, not a problem. The kids who are not in VR, they get a little jealous, they get a little antsy. They might start poking the student who's in VR, who of course isn't expecting it because they can't see the other students, And that can be really jolting. Like, imagine not being able to see people but them poking you. It can ruin the experience. So I know this is more of a classroom management thing, like don't let your kids mess with each other, but if you don't lay this expectation from the beginning and in fact get the students to all agree to this beforehand, they're going to be tempted to bother each other. Another bonus tip, I teased earlier that groups of 2 I think is really the best way to go. When you're prepping your space, make it so that unless you've got 30 virtual reality headsets, which great on you, but especially if you've got the Oculus Go, economically not always possible, design the classroom activity that day to be a rotating stations format. One station of VR where there's groups of 2 in VR at the same time, but then other students, instead of just watching and being bored, staring at and being tempted to bother their peers in VR when these kids over here aren't in VR, give them other activities to do, physically moved in different places around the room. I've seen by far the most success with this because it means that everyone gets a chance in VR, but also that you're doing other activities along the way in the class period to support the learning. There's a lot of information here. You taking notes? Related, because I work with teenagers. Sometimes students will feel self-conscious in VR because they think they look silly with this big thing attached to their head, right? This goes back to my recommendation about stations. And in fact, if you'd like an entire video on how I use station rotation in the classroom when I use VR, make sure you like this video and leave a comment requesting it. Next tip, limit each student's use of VR, especially their first couple of times, especially. Build the expectation that the activity's only gonna last about 5 minutes in VR and then they're gonna take a break and they're gonna rotate to something else. Here's why. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it can happen especially to people who are inexperienced or who have motion sickness problems outside of VR. When they're in VR for a long time, sometimes people can feel warm or thirsty or dizzy and even nauseous if you let it get to that point. Build students' experience with the technology before completely binging. You know what I mean? Again, most people don't experience it, but you want to be prepared for it in case it does happen. So leave me a comment if that's something you'd like a video on as well. The 6th thing to expect, encourage your students to bring a water bottle to combat the potential for motion sickness. I got two more and they're important. Stick with me. In my notebook. Tip number 7. Sorry for yelling. Okay, I'll turn it down. I just get really excited. Recruit 1 to 2 students to really get familiar with the VR hardware and be your tech support. And a lot of them already use this to play video games in case anything goes wrong. That way you can still watch the whole class, provide learning support as needed, and you're not running around trying to make sure things get charged. And if a controller appears to be disconnected, that you can let a student feel like a leader or feel like they're serving the classroom, especially if you've got a student who loves technology. It's a good role for them, and I think it will take a load off of you your first time as well. Even better, if your school district or your school offers instructional technology specialists, prep your lesson with that person and then ask them to come into the classroom and facilitate alongside you, or even for that class. That way you can support learning and someone else can support the nitty-gritty hardware and teach you along the way. It can help to have some backup, why not? All right, I got one more official tip on my notebook, and then I've got a final bonus tip. The 9th way that you can prepare yourself for teaching with VR in the classroom for the first time is to spend some time messing around with it yourself. Watch my video on the kinds of VR equipment so you even know what kind of system you're dealing with that your school has, and then get familiar with where the power button is, the volume controls. Which port do you use to charge the headset? Can you charge your particular headset while it's being used? How long is the cord that comes with the headset? Is there a sensor on your headset that will auto shut off the headset when your student takes it off? Or will it stay on until they manually turn it off? How do you adjust the strap? What are the different ways you can adjust the fit? Is there a way to adjust the focus on the headset so that the image is always crystal clear for your students? What does the interface look like? What does the software look like that you're using? These questions are easy to answer. You just have to know to ask them, and that's what I'm here to help with. I'm happy to make a free printable, downloadable PDF with all these questions if you're interested, so leave me a comment again if that's something that would be useful to you guys, and I'll make that for you. All right, bonus tip, and I would like to think this goes without saying, but sometimes we lose the forest for the trees. When you bring VR into the classroom for the first time, when you even tell your students that you're going to bring VR into the classroom for the first time, like maybe when you send them this video, they're going to be so excited. Try not to have activities that the other students need dead silence for. Know that your students who are not in VR, they might be a little distracted when seeing the reaction from their peers. Almost every single time, I can think of maybe once when this didn't happen, when a teenager puts this amazing technology on and they are fully immersed in situations where they have to use the target language and they really feel like the kinds of language constructions I've been teaching them is useful in a real world context. Like when they put that headset on and they are fully immersed in a new world, their jaws drop to the floor. And there's nothing else like it. Especially if like your teenager students are too cool for school, they will love this. That's a nice thing you can look forward to. So it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. Hey, I'm here every step of the way for you to answer any and all questions you have about using VR in the classroom. I want you to feel like you own this. Like I want you to feel so good about it. Let me know what questions you have. I'm always watching the YouTube comments, so leave me a comment on YouTube. I will happily respond to you. If you look down in the description, or if you click on the images that are appearing on your screen right now, there are some other videos about using VR in the classroom that I think you'd really enjoy. So take a look at those next. See ya.